Welcome to our Azure Incident Retrospective. I'm David Steele.
I'm Sami Kuba. We work in the Azure Communications team.
In addition to providing a written post-incident review after major outages, we also now host these retrospective conversations.
You're about to watch a recording of a live stream where we invited impacted customers through Azure Service Health to join our panel of experts in a live Q&A.
We had a conversation about reliability as a shared responsibility. So this includes our learnings at Microsoft, as well as guidance for customers and partners to be more resilient.
We hope you enjoy the conversation that follows. Super, today's one we're talking about an incident that happened in our China cloud on April the 23rd. This was an issue with our DNS, and joining us today to speak about this, we have Abhishek Tiwari, our Vice President of Software Engineering for DNS and Networking.
And we also have Sudha Mahajan, our General Manager and Partner from our Cloud Networking Product Management team. So we have these live speakers joining us, but we also have several experts from our networking incident management teams standing by ready to answer your questions. So you'll see the Q&A sidebar on the right-hand side. Feel free to ask us any questions about the incident or about our learnings, about our repair items, how you could have handled things differently while we have our conversation today.
Super. Sudha, if I can ask you the first question, please. When I think about how we retire domain names or so on, Microsoft, I mean, we're a big company, we have domain names. We used to have MySpace once upon a time. I'm sure that domains in the cloud are slightly different. What's the process when we think about how we retire domain names, whether publicly or our own domain names that we use internally? Surely there's a system and a process. Could you walk us through what that looks like?
Absolutely. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to the people and go through the process because, as you narrated in the incident, there were certain missteps that were taken. So it will clarify that or offer the people what really were missed. But the thorough process is always being followed. Now, typically what happens is anytime we identify if there is a domain that we need to decom, they are identified based on various criteria. One could be if there hasn't been any activity in the long time. There could be orphan domains. So what we do is when we identify such domains exist, we reach out to the owners of the domain. And if the owner is not identified, we go up higher in the hierarchy to make sure that we have identified someone who has the accountability to make sure that this domain, whether it's a valid domain or whether it can be decom. After that, multiple reminders are being sent and we follow the right process, periodically making sure that the ample heads up has been given to the right people if the domain has any kind of ownership that needs to be validated. Now, if the owners respond back to us saying that, look, this is a valid domain, we remove it from the list of anything that can be decom. If the owners don't reach to us, then again, we follow the right process by going over to the right set of people. The next in the process is that, let's say the right domain has been identified. We also look for if there's an associated zone file that exists with that domain on our DNS servers. Like the zone file exists, then we do more checks on that. For example, is there any kind of traffic that exists? If we identify anything like that, then we directly go back to the owner or again higher up in the hierarchy to make sure that we have ample the process in place to make sure that if we decide to further decom it or we decide not to decom it, the right people have been informed, whoever is the owner and has the accountability. Now, in certain cases, it's possible that, in this case, for example, in this incident, we were missing one step where the traffic existed and the zone was not existent on the China cloud. As we go into the validation and we talk about the incident, we'll talk more about it. Now, if, for example, in this case, the final process is that if the zone came back saying that there's no traffic and it's ready to be decom, we point the zone to inactive servers. And at that point of time, the rest of the process for the decom starts. And then finally, it stays in the park state for a long time. And once that it comes out of that stage, now it's up to us to decide whether we want to renew the zone or we want to sell it externally. But these are all the 5 or 6 steps that we follow in the process where we definitely make sure that, we have validated with the owners whether this can be decom, whether there's traffic, whether there is there's an associated zone, and then eventually, it stays in the park state for a long time before it gets decom. So this is the process that we follow.
Got it. Thank you very much, Sudha. Yeah, Abhishek, anything to add?
Yeah, just to add, since you said, even the zones or domains in cloud versus zones and domains in Microsoft, they are the same. All these domains and zones we talk about here in the retiring process are in public domains and then available over the internet and follow the same Decom process, whether they are used for the cloud services in Azure or by Microsoft and Office and other product and services.
Got it. So that covers all of our domain management, and Sudha gave us a great kind of run through of the process to make sure that we're being thorough before we decommission anything, all of the different stages of validation. So Abhishek, what went wrong in this case? Sudha gave us a bit of a teaser campaign here, but what was unique about the China cloud and our signals from domains that were working in the China cloud? Why didn't that thorough process help us here?
Yeah, first, apologies that incident happened. As Sudha mentioned, we have a thorough MOP, standard procedure, which is well documented, supported by tooling and automation to go for the decom. In this case, what happened as part of the government policies for Azure China Cloud, we were supposed to provide a domain and zone ownership for compliance and audit purposes. And while going through the list, we get lots of domains that our initial as part of when we go through all the domains in the Azure China Cloud, get a huge list, and in that list we try to curate, and then as Sudha mentioned, all these steps finding out the owner, filling out the right metadata activities. Then it came a short list where at least the tooling recommended these are the ones that we don't have ownership, there is no activity. Why? In that list there were 2 domains that were not supposed to be there part of the inactive list, and but were in part of that list. And the reason we will cover in detail, but our tooling that's supposed to check the activity on those 2 domains came out as negative, that there is no activity. And the reason for that tooling that we had was checking and then getting these domain information for DNS services in public cloud rather than in China cloud. So with that check, and then that activity came as a negative, it confirmed that the list, the tool that came up with is a right list, and that started this entire process of basically a decom. So then as an automation, we went ahead and then put the name server for that list to as an inactive name server. What does it mean? That that change is done outside of the Microsoft DNS services or the network. It's done onto the registrar. And once that change is propagated across all DNS servers in the world and in China internet, then end users, when trying to reach out to those domains or applications that are using those domains, would get an NX domain. NX domain is kind of saying this domain does not exist. It's an authoritative response from the DNS server side. It's not no response where you would try multiple other things. It's an authoritative response saying that what you're trying to reach out, it doesn't exist. And most of the time in this case, application feels like they are trying to reach a wrong namespace and give up. So then our customers start seeing the connectivity issues, timeout, and various other things. The impact was bigger because these 2 domains are one of the core domains for Azure China Cloud, and our internal services like Cosmos DB, etc., were using ARM, and ARM is a service that it's the cloud entire management plane. We're using those domains. So we started seeing not only the failures from the customer and their applications who are using these domains, but our service to service and infrastructure communication also seeing impact because of those 2 domains put into the inactive state. So that's in nutshell what has happened in that incident and created this big impact.
And just to add to Abhishek, the 2 domains that here we are talking about are China Cloud App and China Cloud Sites. They were the one, unfortunately, that were missed in the process and put for decom.
Super, thank you. When I was reading through the PIL, one of the interesting things that I found out was about caching. And the way I interpreted this, or the way I understood this, was caching was our hero and our villain. It was our friend and our enemy. And it was great because it buffered the impact to customers, because customers could have been using a cached instance. But at the same time, when we went into recovery, it also buffered our recovery because they were using the old instance, the cached old instance as well. Am I thinking about this the right way? Is that the role of caching in this kind of event?
I'll tweak a bit there. It's and I'll go over like the investment towards resiliency. So in general, when the DNS and it's a protocol itself. So when the DNS records or the domains are there, they have with every answer a TTL, time to live. That's part of the protocol. So as a device or as a server, when you try to resolve a domain name, you'll get an answer and then you'll get a TTL. Hey, you don't have to come if next time you make a connection, you don't have to come to me. And this is the its validity for this duration. And then you can just use that the record for that duration. So that's in general protocol world called caching. And this is what has played a role here because these records were having a TTL and then the DNS resolvers in the world, we call it LDNS resolvers. That's like all external DNS resolvers by ISPs were caching the IPs and then the responses for DNS queries. So in this incident, as Sammy, you pointed out, when we made the change, we didn't see the impact started right away. As these LDNS servers in various part of the world start having the TTL expire on those domains, they start seeing the failure. And I'll cover the mitigation part. But we on the Azure DNS side has another caching layer that's nothing to do with the protocol, but to provide a resiliency in the worst case scenario where entire DNS where we run an active state goes down. We have a caching layer with our all core infra that basically if it sees that, oh, I have seeing a timeout or unreachability to DNS servers, then I'll respond for whatever I have known from the past. It's nothing to do with time to live record or anything. That's just, I know this is worst anyway. I cannot reach out. So why not let me try with the stale records, which is like, it's a saying that stale bread is better than the no bread. So that's what that's the caching we use by ourselves. But this was a very well accepted as per the standard protocol time to live record that has caused the impact to start late, which is expected. But as you said, when we mitigated the incident for all the LDNS servers to get to that, again, back from the inactive name servers to the right name server configuration would took some propagation time.
Got it. That's helpful. Thank you for talking us through the different kinds of caching that were involved here. But you ran a teaser campaign for it. I want to let you finish there. When it comes to the incident itself, you've covered detection well. Could you talk us through kind of what we did to help mitigate this and kind of how we responded once we realized that something bad was happening?
Sure. Detection is I'll also go a bit on the detection because that's helpful on the mitigation part. In this case, from our DNS side and all our services and infra side, we validate what's happening with the DNS queries and responses that's coming to the Azure cloud, which is in this case Azure China cloud. The nature of the incident, given that it's the change made in the registrar, that giving the inactive name server, what we seeing from our monitoring is that suddenly the traffic volume to our DNS servers reduced, but the rest of the traffic that was coming to us, because we serve thousands and thousands of domains. So any traffic that was coming to us, we were successfully responding it. So we were seeing zero failures, except a bit of the traffic dip on the DNS server side. So our alerting fired because we had some runners that using some of those two domains two of those domains. So we got a detection on the traffic dip. We got a detection on our own runners having those issues. And that's where our DRI got engaged right away. But it took a while to correlate that dip and then our runners failures to actually that domain registrar change, and that's the duration. Our DRIs, we call it, the engineer responsible to mitigate the incident, were coordinating and then discussing with other teams what could be a possibility. Once it's identified this is the change that was causing the impact, it was fairly quick to revert back the config to the right name servers. But in that case, the same process is started. It gets updated into the domain registrar, and it has a propagation time as per the TTL, time to live records, for another 30 to 45 minutes. So that's the process. Detection was there. We get the right team, which is on DNS side, engaged, but triangulating it to the change, it still took a good 35 to 40 minutes to say, yep, this is it's causing. And we'll cover some of these parts in learning. But I want our customers to understand these failures when it happens, when the errors not coming to us, and then we see an anomalous traffic dip. It points to many theories. It points to, like, some of the ISPs might be having an issue, and that's why we are seeing less traffic. Some of the WAN side might be, like, routing traffic differently. Hence, it could be. So it's like with the various theories running around, and then, like, it's like finding a needle in a haystack and figuring it out to this change. It took us a while, but that's not per our standard. We strive to do our time to detect and time to mitigate less than 10 minutes, and then we would book repairs and cover in learnings to achieve that goal.
Super, thank you. And Abhishek, to pivot to our learnings, one of the things that we said is we're suspending runs of this type of operation until we can get things in order. One of the first items of repairs we said is that additional validations to obtain name server information. Can we double click on that? I don't know if it's you or Sue, the best person to double click on that, but what does that mean for our customers and for ourselves?
Let's start with Abhishek. I'll add later.
So the Sammy, just to understand question is, like, what we are doing, the additional validation for these the domains that we consider for the, like, eligible for Decom. Yeah. First of all, like, we are stopping this process till those validations are completed. The validation we are doing is it's a two-front. We from our tooling, as we said in the incident, we were looking for the metadata and validity, and then zone ownership, which Sudha mentioned. And this one of the steps were, like, we go up in the hierarchy and then try to get the zone information, zone file. In this case, the Azure public cloud and Azure China cloud and other clouds that we have, these clouds usually have, like, run in parity and run entire of Azure services in their own cloud. So in this case, what happened, DNS, all the DNS services, authoritative service, resolvers of DNS, private DNS resolvers, that all are running in the Azure China cloud. That zone file existed in Azure China cloud, but our tools were checking the zone file in Azure public cloud. And in that case, one of the validation is it does not matter where we do a decom of the domain, because these domain are public domain, though they are applicable for Azure China cloud, but they are still public domain. So we are updating a validation process that validates across all Azure clouds. That's the first validation we would do. Second validation, Sudha mentioned, like, we try to see activity, all the domains that's for the Azure or for Microsoft. Everything is configured and deployed using Azure DNS. We don't put it any other, like, the external DNS server. So this entire information is with us. So if any activity is happening on that domain or that zone, it would be happening through our DNS services. So the tool, it has a check to check the activity on the DNS service side. But again, in this case, it's the same challenge happened. We were checking this activity in public cloud DNS service, which was saying, I see no activity for this domain. So our update on the tooling of the activity to pull the metrics and counters on the traffic hitting on those domains would be across clouds. That's the second validation we would be doing before. And then Sudha mentioned, there are many other validations like looking out for the owner information and sending a probe to the owner about confirming. And so along with all those, plus these two validations, we believe we can avoid categories of these mistakes happening in Decom of the DNS domains.
So there anything to add on the learnings or repairs or additional insights here?
I think Abhishek covered it all. I'll just add, yes, we are putting the validations in place because these two domains were misattributed. How did that happen? And how can we avoid that in future? That means investing in both processes and product. Second thing was from the tooling perspective, Abhishek, he was covering the fact that, from our tool, it did not check the validation for Azure in China, and it only looked at the public cloud. And then the validation came out saying that zone does not exist. So go ahead, you're good to decom that, right? So that tool, that bug that we have, and that extension that we need to do in our tooling to ensure that we cover all clouds and not just the some public clouds, that needs to be fixed. As Abhishek mentioned, our aspirational goal is to have parity between all clouds, and in this case, definitely we found a gap between us and gap with China cloud. We want to make sure that those gaps, as soon as we find out, not just reactively but proactively, we fix them. Our aspirational goal is to be parity with all these clouds within 90 days. Sometimes that doesn't happen, but that's the North Star we are aiming for.
That's helpful to understand here. Well, I did see some questions from customers asking about outside-in monitoring, and I wondered, are either of you able to help? Is this an opportunity where outside-in monitoring could have helped to give us better signals here?
I would say, and I'll explain. We do have outside-in monitoring, and we do have outside-in monitoring for Azure China Cloud as well. What it does, we have our internal monitoring tool that's probing the DNS services and then DNS domains, and we have external tooling, Thousand Eyes. I mean, to be transparent here, like we use different agents and probe points of Thousand Eyes, which are external, like end user and probing to our DNS domains. The part is our DNS server, even in Azure China Cloud, hosts thousands and thousands of domains, right? Like all customer configuration and everything on the part, it's hosted on the DNS domain. So we do not probe externally from Thousand Eye each and every domain. We do some of the domains to make sure, like in our services and infrastructure and connectivity, all those things remain up. To answer is, do we have outside-in monitoring? Yes, it did not detect the failure because we were not probing these two domains. It's a learning for us. If that domain is so critical for Azure China Cloud, then why we will not probe that? And that's a learning, right? We could have, our intention was to, to detect with outside-in monitoring for the DNS and our service failures, but this incident teaches us, hey, we need to care about some of the top critical domains for a specific cloud and make sure they are part of our outside-in monitoring. And yes, we would look into that repair and extend our outside-in monitoring for a category of these domains. Yes.
Super. Thank you very much. Outside, I mean, it's been very interesting learning the role of domains and the role that they play, particularly when customers are even provisioning and they want to deploy a VM and so on, and the role that the domain plays. Outside of the repair items specific for this incident, do we have a strategy around domain ownership, and what does the future look like for how Microsoft engages with domains?
Thank you, and I'll take it. I'll spare Abhishek of some pain on the strategy side. You're absolutely right, Sammy and David. It has been a serious consideration for us, and we are in our long-term investment. We are seriously considering investing in domain registrar and building something internally. So we are internally in conversations, and you'll hear from us pretty soon on that one.
Very good. Another teaser campaign from Sudha. Abhishek, we touched on it a couple of times today. With these China-specific incidents, China isn't our only national cloud. We've got sovereign clouds, for the US government or for China or potentially for other countries. How do we make sure that we have consistency across those different national clouds? You've touched on a few examples where that's kind of tripped us up a little bit. What's the kind of overall strategy to make sure that whether you're a customer of Azure in China or of Azure in the US or anywhere else, that you have a kind of similar experience?
Sure. We treat all clouds equal, and then our goal to run in each cloud with parity, all services that are available and applicable to the cloud. Sometimes services by the nature of the cloud might not be applicable, but for all applicable services to be in parity. And in this case, we aspire any new feature or new services that is coming on public cloud to be in parity within 90 days. We have done our DNS active, which is 2 stacks, like one stack running on Windows, one stack running on Linux, which got available in public cloud. And then last month, we completed that parity in Azure China Cloud as well. So that's our goal, the aspiration to be in parity. Some services and tooling miss out, like the case we are seeing it here, but we strive to be in parity. That's tracked, monitored in dashboard to the top leadership of Azure.
Great. Thank you very much, Abhishek. Good to know that the right folks are looking at it and that we're still investing in the space here. I've saved time in these last minutes or so. I want to turn my question over to my co-host here. We always like to talk about how did we do informing customers about this issue. And Sammy happens to run our Azure communications team. So Sammy, what's different about how communications work for the China cloud and how did we do? Did we keep customers up to date during the incident?
It's a great question. In China cloud, it's not complete parity, but we strive for parity. One of the things is we don't, if an incident happens in a public Azure cloud today, we as Microsoft will communicate to customers what we know, what's going on, and so on. In our China cloud, it's slightly different, where we have a partner team, and they're the ones who have to communicate out. They may to translate if necessary. They might provide links that are in Chinese or specific to our Azure.cn website. And so it goes through a partner operator. So there is an additional hop in there.
Right.
When it comes to how we did, it was bumpy. Today, a lot of the errors that were experienced by customers were around their control plane. So if customers were trying to provision something, it would have failed because we couldn't resolve the domain name. Now, typically speaking, in our public cloud, if customers try and provision something, our brain, which is our auto communication, will communicate to customers within a very short period of time, usually 15 minutes, and say, dear Mr. or Mrs. Customer, you've tried to provision a virtual machine or something and you failed. It's an us problem, not a you problem. And then we can update customers as is. We don't have brain running today in our China cloud, and that's one mark of disparity that we have. When I think about then, okay, well, humans can still communicate and engage. And what we found here is, and Abhishek and Sudha both touched on it, because of caching, there was a slight delay in us getting engaged. And then once we were engaged, we had to engage our partner team. And so as I look at what happened, there were all these events from one hop to another. Each event in itself was kind of acceptable, but it ended up being almost an hour before we got communications out, targeted communications out to customers in their portal. We did get to our status page a little bit earlier because we have control over our status page and we don't need to go through our partner. But even that additional hop of just engaging our partner and translating it and getting it out, it added 10, 15 minutes. Now, again, 10, 15 minutes isn't bad on its own, but plus the engagement, plus, we start thinking about an hour. So some of the repair items that we have, as Abhishek and Sudha have mentioned, it's paramount that we try and strive and close the gaps in disparity between our clouds, particularly when we talk about the technology that's there that can shrink our time to communicate from, hours in some cases to minutes.
Thank you for watching this Azure Incident Retrospective.
At the scale of which our cloud operates at, incidents are inevitable.
Just as Microsoft is always learning and improving, we hope our customers and partners can learn from these too and provide a lot of reliability guidance through the Azure well-architected framework.
To ensure that you get posted incident reviews after an outage and invites to join these live stream Q&A sessions, please ensure that you have Azure Service Health Alerts set up.
We really focused on being as transparent as possible and showing up and being accountable after these major incidents.
Whether it's an outage, a security, or a privacy event, Microsoft is investing heavily in these events to ensure that we earn, maintain, and at times rebuild your trust. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.